We open up our scriptures to the second letter of Paul to his friends in the Corinthian church. It's chapter 4, beginning verses 3 through 6. Paul's using the image of the veil that overlaps from the Old to the New Testament. And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. For we do not proclaim ourselves, we proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For it is the God who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," who has shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. Lifting the veil, or The Light Goes On, are good titles for today's subject matter. The Apostle Paul is talking about doing things one way, and then a light goes on, and we do things in a better way. We see an improvement. For example, years ago, our ancestors used to carry water the hard way. They would carry water in a gourd or in an animal skin. We can just hear them saying, "Surely there must be a better way to carry this water from the river to the house." Finally, somebody saw the light. They invented the clay pot or pitcher, or they invented the wooden bucket. The light went on. The veil was lifted from their eyes and they improved. Or what about our ancestors who were first trying to irrigate their crops? Imagine them digging trenches by hand with a stick or a rock. Finally, somebody said, "What would happen if I tied the rock to the stick?" The first shovel or entrenching tool was invented. Everybody did it the old way until somebody saw the new improved way. More recently, there was that doctor in France named Louis Pasteur. Everybody believed that food and water left out in the open was subject to spontaneous decay. Stuff just wears out. Bread wears out, water gets old. Dr. Pasteur put bread and water under that new thing called the microscope. He saw the bread mold in its early stages. He saw the little things floating under the microscope. And those things would be called algae and bacteria. Dr. Pasteur noticed that both hot and cold temperatures would slow down the growth of these little organisms. Thus, we learned to make our food safe by cooking it or refrigerating it. Another doctor named Joseph Lister was reading Dr. Pasteur's work on defeating germs. Dr. Lister experimented with hand washing and sterilizing against germs. He saw that the infection rate of his surgical patients dropped from 1 in 2 down to 1 in 10 or even 1 in 20. Each doctor saw the light and had found improvements that saved lives. So our friend Paul is saying, lift the veil, turn on the light. Paul is saying, I used to be Jewish, and then Jesus came to be the improvement. So now I followed the improvement, Jesus Christ. To help us readers understand the improvement, Paul talks about the veil. The veil would be on Paul's mind because it goes way back to the days of Moses. First, Moses was sent to lift the veil of slavery from the eyes of the Israelites. They suffered under slavery with the Egyptians. They felt helpless. Helplessness had become their veil. They felt like they could not fight back. They could not leave. God chose Moses to help them lift the veil and improve their lives. God gave them the hope of the promised land. And so Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt. They lifted the veil that said, you cannot leave, and they escaped into the wilderness. But there was another veil to lift. The Israelites still had the veil of slave thinking. They did not know how to run their own lives. The Egyptians had been their bosses, and slave bosses do not want the slaves to think for themselves. This veil needed to be lifted, so God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments were the first step in learning how to run their own lives. Here you go, Israel. Here are the laws you need to be a nation and run your lives. But then there came a time when the new laws became a kind of veil. Down through the years, the people began to think, if we keep the laws, that is all we have to do. If we keep the 10 laws and the bylaws, we are religious enough. This led to nitpicking about the laws. Wash your hands, wash your food, cut your hair the right way. These were the bylaws. The whole purpose of the law was to help the people love God. It was meant to be the ground rules of relationship. Paul himself got caught up in the bylaws as a Jewish Pharisee. And Paul says the world does not even have the bylaws. They are on their own. They do not even go through a Jewish phase to get to know God. They're still worshiping idols. They still pray to stone statues. Christianity needs to teach the world that God is spirit, not wood or stone. God has taught both the law and the love. God sent the statutes to replace the statues. And Jesus came not to abolish the law, the statutes, but to become the embodiment of the statutes. The law was always meant to help people love God and neighbor. These are the improvements. These are the lights that God switched on for the people. First, there were the statutes, and then there was the Son, Jesus Christ. That's when the light really switched on for the people. Paul went from hand-washing Phariseeism to heart-warming Christianity. And after Paul's heart was washed, then his heart was warmed. That is the improvement. That is the veil we are meant to lift. Jesus Christ is the new improvement. He makes the new improvement in us. Amen.